very pleased to partner with my colleague, Dr. Brent Holfeld, on his webinar, Cyber Dating Violence, and what it looks like and how we can support youth. But before I let him take over, just want to go through the format today. We posted a link in the chat box to his slides, and you can find them there. The webinar will be about 75 minutes. We'd like the webinar to be as interactive as possible. So please ask questions along the way, and I have permission to, as I moderate them, I'm going to ask, if you have a question that's burning, I will pop onto the screen and ask him in that moment. We also have planned 15 minutes at the end of the webinar, so you can continue to ask your questions there. As always, if you're familiar with PREVNet, we like to evaluate everything we do. So please, at the end, there will be an evaluation link, and it will take about 2 minutes to complete this survey, and it's completely anonymous. Once you've completed the evaluation, you'll be prompted to enter your name and email, and you'll get a certificate of attendance. Those are completely unlinked, so your evaluation is not in any way related to getting your certificate. So even though, do not worry about that. And we really appreciate your evaluation. It makes a difference. It helps us figure out what we should be doing better and how we can do it better and how we can most meet your needs. The webinar is being recorded, so afterwards we'll send out a link to everyone that's registered, and you can share it. We believe in sharing knowledge and supporting as many people as we can, so please feel free. So it's my pleasure to introduce Brett. He's an assistant professor in the psychology department at Memorial University of Newfoundland. Brett's multidisciplinary training is in forensic, social, and lifespan development perspective, and it provides diversity to both his teaching and his research. His research addresses how can we promote healthy relationships for children and adolescents and young adults in online and in physical environments. I'm delighted to have Brett with us, and delighted that he's going to spend the next 45 minutes to an hour sharing his deep knowledge. So over to you, Brett.
Thank you for the introduction, Wendy. I'm just going to try to bring up my PowerPoint now. Okay, hopefully everyone could see that. Okay, so I do want to thank Wendy and the rest of the PREVNet team as well for the invitation to present this webinar on a topic I feel is very relevant and timely, especially right now with the COVID pandemic. And I think this is going to be useful information to add to the community of practice as well. I do want to thank all of you who registered for this session, who are here live for this session as well, and for those who may watch the recording at a later time. I'm excited to share some of my knowledge in cyber dating violence with all of you, because I really value the applied nature of what I do. Specifically, I hope that this information will help you to support youth in your own experiences, wherever you are. So nice to meet everyone, although I can't see anyone directly right now. So I just want to spend a few minutes going over a brief outline of what I'll be talking about for the session today. So we're going to talk briefly about the nature of teen dating relationships. And we know that these have changed significantly as a result of increased access and use of technology. As I said, especially in the current climate we're living in. We're going to talk about unhealthy patterns of teen dating relationships. Many of you are at least somewhat familiar with traditional teen dating violence, and we're not going to spend any time talking about that. Instead, we're going to focus on cyber dating violence with the acronym shown here, which is an emerging experience among adolescents all over the world. We're going to discuss what it is, the terminology used to describe the experiences, what it looks like, a bit about the prevalence and the impact of these experiences. And so this discussion will set the stage or foundation for the second half of the session, which will focus on what can be done, specifically talking about some strategies to identify and address cyber dating violence. So we're going to discuss them from the perspective of educators, from parents or caregivers, as well as from adolescents themselves. Unfortunately, the research is still fairly limited. So we're going to discuss some empirical based, so research focused, and non-empirical based, so non-research focused strategies that may be beneficial to supporting youth. We're also going to talk about some of the characteristics of healthy and unhealthy relationships. So factors such as trust, independence, communication, and conflict resolution. And specifically how they apply within the online environments, because they do look a bit different. And it's important to have that discussion. So teen dating relationships. So we know that the dynamic of teen dating relationships has changed significantly over the years, with this increasing use of smartphones and social media in particular. It's changed how adolescents socialize and communicate with each other. And it's become the primary form of communication in intimate relationships. For example, it's used to develop, maintain, or even end relationships. So a quote by a young female here, we say it to each other and we post it up on the internet, or you see pictures of us on the internet, and then you know it's official, to stay the F away. So it's used to highlight that there is a relationship that's currently going on. So it can be used to let people know the situation. The technology makes it easier to stay connected to your partner than ever before. But it creates added pressure to be available to your partner at any time, and blurs what is a healthy versus unhealthy boundary. And we're going to discuss that a bit more later, this issue of the boundaries. The constant need to check social media provides greater access and greater opportunities to monitor a partner's behavior online. And it may create this perception that these controlling types of behaviors are acceptable. And this perception is further supported in mainstream media with shows such as Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey, depicting that it's okay to cross the boundaries at certain times, such as tracking your partner's location. And monitoring is becoming much more common and normative within the context of adolescent relationships. And it's viewed as appropriate within these relationships. For example, female adolescents suggest it's necessary to maintain a relationship. Male adolescents suggest that sharing online passwords and sexting show a sign of trust and commitment in a relationship. And just think about that for a second. That's really how far we've come with the monitoring. For adolescents, they think that these are things that should happen within the context of their relationships. And that's very concerning because we know that monitoring is an early warning sign for jealousy and violence. In terms of the stability of teen dating relationships, generally they are unstable because there's a lot of concerns about anxiety and trust within these relationships for both adolescent males and females who worry about a partner's cheating and infidelity. what's interesting is both males and female adolescents will use technology to provide some kind of reassurance that nothing bad is happening. For example, they may go through text messages and online posts to see who their partner's been talking to. And they may even demand the password to do so. They could also delete friends such as exes that they feel like the partner should not be talking to. And within these relationships, some jealousy is viewed as positive. It shows the person that you care. But of course, too much jealousy is problematic and could have impact the partner negatively. So there really is this continuum of jealousy that relates to these experiences. So we're going to focus specifically on cyber dating violence. There's a lot of variability in the operationalization of cyber dating violence, meaning there's a lot of variability in how it is defined across the literature. Broadly, it relates to experiences where technology is used to control, harass, stalk, or abuse a partner. And this can be done through text messaging, through social media, through email, through tracking or location apps, or some kind of key recording software. So ultimately, the technology has created opportunities to control and harass a partner whenever and however they want. We're going to use a very specific definition of cyber dating violence for the discussion today that is more comprehensive than many of the others out there. We're going to define it as the intentional use of technology to abuse an intimate partner or an ex-intimate partner by implementing control and monitoring tactics or by disseminating information of a sexual nature or not without consent. I just want to highlight a couple key points here. Intimate partner or ex-intimate partner. We're going to talk about situations where the cyber dating violence occurs after a relationship ends. And that's still really important to consider. And without consent, so without the partner's permission, that's also really important. In any case, it can lead to considerable feelings of distress, fear or concern of safety for one or both partners. And it could be one-sided or could be reciprocal in nature, meaning it's possible that both partners are experiencing cyber dating violence. There's a lot of variability in the terminology used to describe these experiences. Just to highlight a few examples, it's been called digital dating abuse, digital dating violence, cyber intimate partner violence, technology-assisted dating violence and abuse, and cyber dating abuse. All of these concepts attempt to represent the same type of experiences, but it's important to be familiar with the ways in which the experiences are depicted. And we're also going to use very specific language to talk about these experiences. So adolescents who perpetrate cyber dating violence, we're going to refer to them as adolescents who engage in cyber dating violence. Adolescents who are victimized are those who experience cyber dating violence. I like to describe the experiences in this way because it really helps to avoid the use of labels that are used to categorize adolescents, and we know some of the stigmas attached to certain categories of experiences. So before we get into some of the strategies, it's important to highlight really some of the layers of what these experiences will look like, because it can look very different for every single individual. So there are two basic types, direct and indirect. The direct involves abuse that occurs in a private context where no one else could witness it. So it could include stalking and control, such as tracking social media, tracking locations, sending hurtful text messages. Can include harassment, such as repeated messaging, and can include sexual violence, sending unwanted sexual pictures or sexts. There's also an indirect type, information that's disseminated to others with the intent to harm a person. So it's not necessarily one-on-one. So any posts or pictures or videos may be shared about the person, which may include sexual content. For example, the sexual content could include posting sexual images or videos online for others to see. Non-sexual content may include posting personal or private information about that person online or to their friends. So as opposed to the one-on-one format, this is done more indirectly. And feel free, as Wendy suggested, if you do have any questions, please feel free to interrupt or write it in the chat. I'm perfectly fine with that, because I know if you have a really pressing question, it's better to ask it in real time.
I missed one in real time, so it's going to take you back a few slides, but I might as well, since you had the invitation, I'll ask now. Why intimate partner rather than just partner? To most kids, intimate equals sexually involved.
It's a bit of a tricky one, because a lot of adolescents use a lot of different terminology to describe what their relationships could look like. There's a lot of variability to them. So what makes sense to one adolescent may be slightly different to another. So it may involve sexual relations, it may not, but it really depends. It appears to depend a bit on the adolescent, I feel. Other questions, or just that one for now? Okay. So I created these categories of cyber dating violence based on what's really been presented in the literature, and I feel that these categories do a nice job really emphasizing the extent of what these experiences can look like. So I just want to spend a few minutes going over these categories before we start talking about some of the strategies later on. So sexual coercion. This can involve pressure to talk about sex, pressure to sext, so sending intimate pictures or receiving unwanted pictures. Can include pressure to pose in front of a webcam. And many of these pressures may be more relevant and more frequent now with a result of the COVID pandemic. But we don't quite have that information as of yet. Humiliate can be a way to force the sexual coercion as well. So sharing with others personal or intimate pictures without their consent. And that these pictures or perhaps videos can be used against them later on potentially. But in essence, they can be used as blackmail. Next, we have monitoring, which is viewed as the most common category of cyber dating violence by many researchers. Monitoring where your partner is. So there's a variety of location apps that can be used to provide this information. Sometimes hidden or blocked numbers can provide this information as well. Monitor who they're talking to. Okay. Shared online passwords allows one to check text messages or check social networking posts. Sometimes a partner may even demand an explanation for some of the posts or text messages they see. Key logging software can also help provide this information for adolescents. Monitoring what they're doing. Contacting friends or family members. Or if images or videos of the person are tagged online, this may indicate what they're doing as well. What's interesting about monitoring is it appears to be perceived differently by male and female adolescents. Typically, girls' monitoring behaviors appear less serious, and in some cases just annoying, to male adolescents. But in the reverse situation, girls or female adolescents may be very concerned about their safety if their male partner is using many monitoring tactics. But I have a nice quote here that really emphasizes an alternate perspective. And this is a quote by a 17-year-old male. I think that guys are more impacted psychologically because girls are good at giving guys feelings of guilt when they haven't done anything. And I think that's really psychological violence because it ruins your day. You get up in the morning and feel like you've done something wrong. It doesn't sound that bad, but I think that if it ruins your everyday, things in your everyday kind of lose color, then I think it's a secret issue. So although there's these general perceptions by gender, there still could be very unique experiences that are important to consider. And you'll see in the next few slides, I include a number of different quotes from adolescents themselves that are really going to help to illustrate what these experiences look like for them and really can help give you a greater appreciation for them. And why is monitoring important? As we mentioned, it is an early warning sign for jealousy and violence later on within relationships. Next category is control. Control over who they can or cannot talk to. This can include deleting or blocking exes or friends of the opposite sex who's commented on your partner's posts. Controlling what they can or cannot post, such as certain pictures or images. So the following quote is a 15-year-old female who's talking about her boyfriend. Yes, he did delete pictures that he didn't like I'd post on Instagram. Just like took over my whole life really, and he did the same on Twitter because he found out I used the same password. And after a while, he deleted my entire Instagram account. And the female later went on to highlight that this experience really took over her whole life. As we know, social media is a huge part of adolescents' lives. Wendy?
Yes, we have a question, and I think it's important maybe, and you might want to make some statement around it, which is someone asked about, I'm curious about the use of male/female here. Has the research been done among heterosexually partnered participants only, or are patterns different among those who are not in heterosexual intimate relationships?
Great question. So I should have pointed out, and I think I do later, that most of the research thus far is focused on heterosexual relationships. So most of the examples we're going to talk about highlight male and female relationships. but we don't quite have a good understanding of what these experiences look like for homosexual relationships. And that really is an important area of future research. Are these patterns the same? Are these categories the same? That's very relevant as we think about any type of intervention, prevention efforts in cyber dating violence. But unfortunately, thus far, the majority of this has focused on heterosexual relationships. But good question. Next category, we have harassment. And this could include threats of physical violence. So harassment can occur in a number of different ways. One way is scaring. So making them afraid if they don't respond to a partner's calls or messages. For example, if you don't meet me there and there, I will beat you up. This is a 16-year-old girl, and this is a text message from her boyfriend that she received. Another example, it would have been so much better for everyone if you committed suicide. This is a text message that a 16-year-old boy received from his girlfriend. So it can be used in many different ways, and clearly this is very serious to receive these types of messages. Another way in which harassment can occur is through barraging. It involves the constant messages or phone calls. 19-year-old female talking about her boyfriend. He sent texts all the time, all day, long into the night, and in the beginning, that was exciting. We were so in love that it was just funny. But then he started to get very angry if I fell asleep without saying goodnight. I would wake up to 20 unanswered phone calls, and when he would get into fits of rage. So, and we'll talk a bit about this later, that what happens early on in the relationship may change the perception later on. So if there's a lot of communication with technology early on, that may be viewed differently in the initial stages of the relationship versus later stages in the relationship. Harassment can occur through humiliation, spreading rumors, posting derogatory messages online. This can include creating hate pages about a current or former partner, sharing private images, videos of others without permission, and again, may include sexual content. Can work through impersonation, so pretending using a partner's social networking account without their permission. And this is actually pretty common. This could include deleting contacts or comments or messaging friends. And this could happen even after a relationship ends. And the last way in which harassment can occur is through stalking. And first, I'm going to share a quote by a 17-year-old girl. "I'm a stalker and I'm proud of it." Even the conceptualization of stalking behavior appears to have changed. Some adolescents view this as a positive because it could help them to find out information about a person, who they are, who they talk to, how they present themselves. And they could use this information to protect themselves or evaluate the person in a potential relationship. But this behavior throughout the course of a relationship, again, may be viewed very differently. And sometimes individuals or adolescents will make a fake social media account and befriend the partner to get some of this information. So that's really just a nice little snapshot of what these experiences can look like. And again, they can look so very different for adolescents. Next, I want to briefly talk about prevalence and impact of cyber dating violence before getting into some of the strategies. It's really hard to identify accurate rates of cyber dating violence because there's a lot of variability in how people have measured it and defined these experiences. Generally, across studies, those who've experienced cyber dating violence ranges from 12% to 56% across studies. Those who've engaged in cyber dating violence, about 10% to 20%. And I do want to point out here as well, the majority of this research has focused on adolescents and to a lesser extent, young adults. So we don't know much about these experiences outside of these age groups thus far. If we look at sexual versus non-sexual cyber dating violence, non-sexual is twice as common as sexual cyber dating violence. And it's typically characterized by harassment, control, and abuse. Looking at some of the patterns by gender, they are largely inconsistent. So in terms of involvement in cyber dating violence, some studies find girls are more likely to experience it, some find that boys. For engagement, we see a similar kind of pattern. But what's interesting is that we do start to see these differences emerge if we look at the specific type of experience. In other words, if we look based on these categories exclusively to identify patterns. So if we look at the monitoring category we talked about, girls monitor their partner's behavior more than boys. Boys pressure girls more to send sexually explicit images. And boys make more threats and use control more than girls do. So these patterns start to become more clear if we look at the specific type of experience. If we look at comparisons with traditional teen dating violence, rates of cyber dating violence are comparable to rates of physical dating violence. And cyber dating violence often co-occurs with traditional teen dating violence experiences. Some studies find as much as a 50% overlap in experience. And this may give some insight into some intervention efforts. Adolescents who experience sexual cyber dating violence are 7 times more likely to experience sexual coercion. So there appears to be some overlap in terms of the nature of the experience as well. What is pretty clear is that these experiences can be very impactful in adolescents' lives. Much of this relates to characteristics within the digital environment. There's greater access to your partner. You can reach your partner anytime from anywhere. There's greater ability to follow your partner remotely without their knowledge, so monitoring. There's greater ability to abuse your partner in front of a large, potentially anonymous, potentially unlimited audience. And it may be very difficult to remove content online. So there's opportunities to experience victimization over and over. Briefly, I want to highlight some of the associations the researchers found with experiences of cyber dating violence and engagement in cyber dating violence. In terms of experiences of cyber dating violence, it's related to experiences with traditional dating violence that we talked about, risky online activities, such as sexting, greater use of social networking sites, greater experiences of sexual violence, greater engagement in cyber dating violence. So there may be a bit of a cyclical relationship there. And it's related to an anxious attachment style. We also see associations with, or negative associations with psychological well-being, depressive symptoms, symptoms of anxiety, and health quality of life. And this health quality of life represents physical health, relationships, and well-being. So it really provides this more comprehensive type of measure. And what we're seeing with some early longitudinal research, so research that looks at adolescents' experiences over time, is that experiences of cyber dating violence, which are relatively stable over time, are related to poor health quality of life and more depressive symptoms over time. In other words, we're seeing early signs that it's related to poor developmental outcomes over time, which is another reason why we need to start addressing these experiences. In terms of engagement in cyber dating violence, it's related to engagement in online aggression, traditional bullying, delinquency, and depressive symptoms, just to name a few. Jealousy and hostility may also be warning signs for engagement in cyber dating violence, which isn't overly surprising. Overall, females report greater distress from these experiences than males. So now that we have at least some background of what cyber dating violence is and kind of what it looks like, I want to spend some time going over probably is the information you're most interested in. What can we do about it? What are some strategies that we could use to identify and address cyber dating violence? So we're going to consider the strategies from the perspective of educators, as well as the perspective of parents and caregivers, and a little bit about adolescents themselves. But we have to recognize that these experiences don't occur in isolation from adolescents' environments. So we're going to use the social ecological model that describes development in terms of interactions between the individual and their social contexts, such as the peer group, family, school, the community, the culture, and so on. And these bi-directional associations are constant and can change over time. So any cyber dating violence intervention effort can't just focus exclusively on the individual. You have to think about the social context as well. So it's important to note that many of the educational and awareness strategies that we will talk about do go hand in hand with each other, even though we're only talking about them individually or one at a time. And they're not going to appear in really any specific order. So some strategies are specific to the school environment, and some can be adopted to home environments as well. So first, the educator perspective. The task of modern educators is not to cut down jungles, but to irrigate deserts. Really a nice quote by C.S. Lewis. And this really emphasizes the fact that educators, the goal of educators is to create an effective learning environment for students to succeed. This includes promoting healthy teen relationships, which will reduce the risk of cyber dating violence. If students are less distracted in the classroom, they could focus on learning both in and outside the classroom. So one thing we could do is address students' norms and attitudes towards cyber dating violence. And this is a really important one. We expect these to be a bit different from male and female adolescents that we talked about earlier. So it may be useful to separate the class. So part of this is to challenge their beliefs that controlling and monitoring your partner through technology is normative. It's already pretty clear it is normative to them, but we want to challenge this idea. Discuss why these behaviors may be problematic in any dating relationship. We know the use of social networking sites is related to greater feelings of jealousy in dating relationships. And this jealousy may lead to greater distrust in your partner and contribute to problematic relationship behaviors, such as excessive texting and calling, checking posts and text messages, tracking, etc. To address these attitudes, you may want to make an anonymous survey. It could be online or offline. This can include true-false questions, multiple choice questions, or even some scenarios. Questions like, the majority of students in my school have experienced cyber dating violence. And ask students to indicate their level of agreement with a statement like that. Or ask open-ended questions like, what percentage of kids are involved in cyber dating violence at my school? You can collect the averages across all the questions and discuss the patterns and perceptions of norms and attitudes towards cyber dating violence. What it can look like, rates of experiences, how technology complicates these situations. This will also demonstrate to students you are familiar with the topic and can intervene when necessary to support youth involved in cyber dating violence. And from a social psychological perspective, we know that a change in attitudes may predict a change in behaviors. So if we can get adolescents to change their attitudes toward how the technology is used within relationships, specifically less controlling, less monitoring, this may reduce experiences of cyber dating violence. Okay. We have to think about creating safe and inclusive spaces. Wendy, question?
Hi. Yeah, we had a question come in. Do you believe that to change the norms for youth and adults, that CDV should form a part of the domestic abuse cycle and discussed as such?
Can you ask that question again? Sorry.
Yeah, if it's not clear, it's in the chat. Do you believe that to change the norms for youth and adults, CDV should form a part of the domestic abuse cycle and discussed as such? I think it's TDV.
A good question. I'm not really sure, to be honest. It's kind of a big question. I think the norm piece is really important because I think there's a lot of misinformation about topics such as these, and starting to challenge their beliefs and challenge these attitudes can help to create some kind of change, or if nothing else, provide them with more accurate information and knowledge, which we know can make a big difference.
Yeah.
And again, that it's tough to say. It could be different with young adults versus adolescents as well. So creating safe and inclusive spaces where adolescents feel that they could talk about some of their experiences. We know the importance of creating these support environments. how beneficial that is for adolescents in terms of their development. So perhaps setting up something like a sharing box, can be online or offline, where students can anonymously write or type a message of an experience they may be going through in a relationship. However, students need to know from an ethical standpoint that an educator or counselor will be collecting the messages, and if there's a danger or potential for harm, that they have a legal responsibility to report it to the police. It can also be used in a way that no individual would be unlocking the box to read the messages. It could be simply an outlet for students to alleviate some of their thoughts and experiences. Another way to do this is through focus groups conducted during school hours. It may be beneficial to conduct mixed focus groups, mainly because, as we said, most of the research thus far has focused on heterosexual relationships. But it is very possible that female adolescents are more comfortable talking to a female, and male adolescents may be more comfortable talking to a male. And we also have to consider the importance of looking at other groups of students that, again, has received less attention in this literature, who may have some of these same kind of experiences. So we have to really think about the environments we're creating, which can improve the school climate, which we know makes a big difference. We could think of a peer mentor model type of approach. Select or have grade 12 students volunteer as mentors and advocates against cyber dating violence for these younger students. We know that younger students typically look up to more senior students, and they may be more willing to listen to them when they're talking about cyber dating violence. So you could have these more senior students come into younger classes and discuss what cyber dating violence is, what it looks like, and some of the complexities we've discussed already. Grade 12 students may lead different types of activities, such as poster making, that students can participate in, and these posters can be distributed across the school. On its own, this can increase students' awareness of cyber dating violence and increase their exposure to accurate information on the topic. So influence their attitude, which again can influence their behavior. We could also think about some different kinds of ideas, such as role play and dramatization. Modeling cyber dating violence through different forms of expression. Music, drawing, painting, etc. And this could allow students to share their experiences or thoughts about cyber dating violence through means that doesn't require direct communication or confrontation. In other words, give this additional venue to increase students' awareness and potentially spark more interest, because it's going to be different than what they typically see. Is typically going to have someone come to class and talk about cyber dating violence. And this alternate format can be very effective. For example, this idea worked very well with a high school student here that I kind of supervised recently, who put on a play to depict cyberbullying to younger students. And you could see the reaction of the students afterwards who watched the play, and based on their comments afterwards, that it affected them in a really different way and really got them to think about those experiences differently. And those are some of the goals we're thinking about. How can we get students to think about these topics in a different way? How can we reach more of these students? The next big area looks at the perspective of educator and parents and caregivers, promoting positive social media and online habits. And this is a really big area. So part of this is looking at healthy and unhealthy relationship or unhealthy communication patterns through technology. And these are conversations that should happen throughout any romantic relationship. So trust and independence, respecting boundaries and space of your partner. But what is a healthy boundary when dealing with technology? Posing that question to many adults would be a difficult one as well. Because we know technology makes it easier to reach the partner. And it leads to the expectations that they should always be available, which is not practical, which is not healthy. So it's important to talk about the risks of sharing online passwords or smartphone codes with your partner. It may be important to change these passwords, change these codes after a relationship ends so that they're not changed on you, the adolescent, because it can and it does actually happen. Discuss the importance of using privacy measures on social networking platforms. Reducing the amount of content seen by others can reduce the likelihood of experiencing cyber dating violence. For example, information, pictures, videos that are sent or shared online may not be kept between you and your partner. And this could be an important point in establishing a relationship. The need to constantly check text messages or social media posts of your partner is not healthy and appears to be more common among female adolescents. And this is getting at that fear of missing out idea. It's going to create feelings of distrust and jealousy within a relationship that typically escalates over time. Be willing to allow your partner to participate in their own activities and interests. You don't need to be a part of every group chat they're involved with, through WhatsApp or Facebook or whatever it is. Emphasize the importance of individuals discussing their respective boundaries at the beginning of a relationship. These are not going to be the same for everyone. They may differ across male and female adolescents, and they may differ across cultures. But these are important conversations to have. Okay. Communication. Frequency of communication, listening, using respectful language, all important hallmarks of communication. But it's easy to forget all these when using technology. So researchers have asked adolescents, what is the appropriate frequency of communication with your partner? And it appears to depend based on the nature of the relationship and the age of the individuals involved. For example, daily interaction is viewed as appropriate as long as it's not constant throughout the day, such as hourly or multiple times within the hour, because then it's viewed as annoying and a little bit obsessive. And this appears to be endorsed more by early versus late adolescents. What could be too much communication through technology? Okay. One young female suggested you can be like over obsessive, like every minute to hello, 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 and it just keeps on going. And can lead to a lot of discomfort, especially among female adolescents. at the start of that relationship, more online interaction is viewed as positive. But if it continues, it becomes annoying or obsessive. And male adolescents perceive it in this way. And female adolescents report greater feelings of safety concerns in the same situation. As I said, we only know most from the perspective of the heterosexual relationships thus far. So in any relationship, it's important to talk about how much communication is sufficient, what might be too much. This is getting at some of those boundaries. What about responding to online communication? Because this is a bit tricky as well. The timing of an online response may create a lot of anxiety, especially in female adolescents. You may not know when your partner received the message because you could turn off the read or received feature on text messages and many social networking sites. I don't think you can on Instagram though. It's important to be aware of these types of behaviors that may create problems within the relationship. It relates to these conversations about healthy boundaries. And some adolescents may not use their smartphones, may not use social media as much as others. And that could create further problems within these relationships or differences in expectations, again, relating to these boundaries. And conflict resolution, non-aggressive ways where both individuals are part of the decision-making process. Remind adolescents that the use of retaliation may make the situation worse. So if you respond to your partner's abusive online behaviors, such as monitoring, by doing the same to them, it's going to likely make the situation worse in the long run. So we can use hypothetical scenarios to discuss what might be appropriate ways of responding in situations involving conflict or cyber dating violence, and discuss constructive or assertive coping strategies for adolescents who may experience cyber dating violence. And this also relates to trying to build or foster resiliency skills in adolescents. Discuss how to report or block a partner online if you're uncomfortable in a relationship. How to potentially end certain relationships or when to end certain types of relationships. And the importance of seeking some kind of support from a trusted peer or adult if you are uncomfortable in a relationship. All of those are very important information that adolescents may not be familiar with. Becoming familiar with the technology that adolescents are using. And this is really a challenging one for many educators and many parents, because the technology is always changing. But we need to have an idea of how they're using it and the language they're using to communicate with others. For example, TikTok is extremely popular among many adolescents right now, but that's probably going to change in the future. So fortunately, there are many websites that offer very useful information on topics related to this. Cyberbullying Primus, for example, is primarily focused on parents, but can provide educators with important information, for example, on topics such as texting or sexting, which is part of the cyber dating violence. And Media Smarts has a ton of different resources for educators, parents, as well as adolescents themselves. And collectively, we want to do the same thing. We want to increase our knowledge of what cyber dating violence is, how it works, what it can look like, so that it could increase students' willingness to share their experiences with educators or parents. And so that you're in a better position to help them in these situations. Creating this support outlet for them that they may not otherwise have. And this helps to create these open lines of communication. When you have the knowledge and they know that you have the information and tools to help them. Know some of the warning signs. We talked about some of the associations with cyber dating violence earlier. Educators, parents, and teens may be able to pick up on these. If an adolescent is engaging in some kind of atypical behavior with technology, they're withdrawn from technology or upset after using it, it may be hard for educators to notice, but may be easier for parents or for peers. It may suggest the student had some kind of uncomfortable experience online, but it may or may not have been cyber dating violence. But it could start to create these open lines of communication. I know this is going a little bit long, just some final remarks. There isn't much in terms of intervention in this area yet because it is still a fairly new area of research. We have to consider not only the individual, but also the social contexts in adolescents' lives that may contribute to these types of experiences. Increasing our knowledge, educators, parents, adolescents, increasing our awareness of the topic can create these shifts in attitudes that hopefully creates these shifts in behaviors and may help to reduce the effects of these experiences. And creating these safe and supportive environments for those conversations to occur is really important piece of that. Adolescents may not want to come to an educator, may not want to come to a parent, because they may not think that these adults understand technology enough to support them in these experiences. So all of these types of ideas are really important in thinking about any kind of prevention intervention effort. So that's pretty much all I have for you today. The last few slides are just references based on much of the content I presented today. So,
Well, thanks so much, Brett. That was excellent. And I really love how you presented the sort of an conceptual knowledge and understanding what is this so that we can really recognize and then identify it. And then really understanding sort of what we know about it and then mapping that onto some really concrete strategies. So thanks. I found it really, really helpful and thought it was great. So I'll just open the floor. I haven't seen a new question yet, but they might be thinking of them now. I do know that one of our panelists, Darren, has said, I also believe teaching youth how to record evidence of CDV is important so that the abusive partner is unaware that you are doing so. As an example, I know several youth have used a Vault app to store messages that if their abusive partner has access to their phone, they will not be able to see such evidence as being collected. So that's a really good practical tip. Thank you, Darren.
that's definitely a good point. That app I know has been used to hide pictures as well from partners and parents and that kind of thing also.
So the floor is open. If you have a question, please put it in the chat box. I have one as you're talking. I was just sort of thinking about, like, to what extent is CDV a separate behavior from like face-to-face teen dating violence? Like, what's the overlap?
Well, some studies find the overlap as much as 50%, and that's really the high end. Most of the studies are anywhere from 0 to 50% that looked at both forms. I think it's looking similar to relations what we've seen with traditional bullying and cyberbullying, that there is certainly some overlap because the same behaviors can be conducted in both environments, but there are also unique aspects that are important to consider in the technological world that are separate from the face-to-face or physical environments.
Another one is we're working in Northern Ontario on a campaign to address what we are calling tech-facilitated violence, because we want to include the use of phones in this work. We are struggling with this term as it does not resonate with you. Are you using cyber dating violence as a blanket term that also includes phone use? I really enjoyed this conversation.
Like phone use.
Sorry, with youth, not you.
Like phone use in general, or within the context of dating violence? Not quite sure. Understand.
They're doing a campaign to address tech-facilitated violence, and want to include the use of phones in this work. So I think maybe in, I don't know. Leanne, do you want to give us some more information?
Well, phones would be a part of it, because it's just another way in which the behaviors can occur.
Yeah, hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Thanks so much for the talk. It's really great and very timely for us. And so for us, we're looking more broadly at all kinds of violence perpetrated online that youth might be experiencing. And so we've kind of been looking at different terms and asking youth what they call this when they're experiencing it, both online and on their phones. And so just trying to, and so I just want to get some clarity when you're using the term cyber dating violence, are you including in that the use of or violence that may be experienced through phone use, right? Not just, when I think of cyber, it's like online and not necessarily phone use, like texting and those sorts of things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so my kind of idea of cyber is just the technology piece in general. So it could be internet, could be smartphones, and smartphones allow you to do much of the same things you can do on the internet. So I think it's important. Like, we would typically ask about behaviors specifically, which kind of gets around the tech piece a little bit. So you don't necessarily have to ask if it's occurring through a smartphone or through the internet specifically, but you could just focus on the behaviors alone to give insight into the experiences.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Like, I think one of the things, it may not be the mechanism, whether it's a tablet or a phone, but it's the behavior that matters. So how they, where they enact those behaviors may not matter as much.
Yeah.
Another question I think is really important that I'm wondering that came up, is there any research on CDV across racialized groups? No, not that I know of.
Very little across any kind of cultural groups that I've seen as well. It's
really important issue, yeah.
It's the early research is pretty narrow in the focus, for sure.
Yeah, heterosexually oriented and white, unfortunately, yeah.
And adolescents primarily,
yeah. Darren notes that I like to call it digital relationship abuse. That was a term coined by youth that he worked with.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm conscious of time, so I just want to say thanks again. Brett, really great presentation, really helpful. Really appreciated your thoughtfulness and your expertise and your willingness and generosity to share your knowledge. Just want to remind everybody to do the evaluation that's in the text box, and also just to let you know, you can download all the slides. We put the link to all the slides in the text, and if you miss out there, it will be on our website. So thanks very much. Hope you all have a great day, and please stay safe. Stay safe. Thanks so much. All right. Take care.